They thought that the snowstorm would hide what they were about to do. They thought fear would keep everyone silent. On a frozen night in Silver Creek, men broke into a cabin, believing power and money could erase a family's legacy. But they forgot something older than violence, stronger than threats. Because sometimes God does not send thunder. Sometimes he sends a man who has already survived war, and a dog trained to recognize evil before it speaks. What happened next was not luck. It was consequence. It was justice moving quietly through the snow. Before we continue, share this story with someone who still believes that wrongdoing never goes unseen. Comment where you're watching from, and subscribe for more true stories of faith, courage, and justice fulfilled. The night of snow and screams, snow erased the edges of Silver Creek, Colorado, swallowing sound, light, and mercy in the same white breath. The storm had come early that night, thick flakes tumbling sideways under the glow of a single flickering street lamp at the edge of the town. The road leading out of Silver Creek was usually quiet after sunset, but winter made it feel abandoned, as if the world itself had stepped back and decided not to watch. A boy lay in the snow. He couldn't have been more than 16. Thin, all elbows and knees, dressed in a jacket 2 sizes too small, the kind handed down rather than chosen. His dark hair was matted with slush, his cheek pressed into the ice as he tried to curl inward, arms raised in a useless shield. Each breath came out sharp and broken, fogging the air for a split second before vanishing. 2 men stood over him. They were broad and heavy, wrapped in cheap winter coats that smelled of old liquor and damp wool. One had a red, swollen nose and a patchy beard that clung to his jaw like it didn't quite belong there. The other wore his anger openly, shaved head gleaming under the street lamp, boots planted wide as if daring the ground to move him. "Look at him," the shaved-headed man sneered, nudging the boy's ribs with his toe. "Thinks he owns the sidewalk." The boy whimpered, not crying, just making a small sound that escaped before he could stop it. That sound did it. The kick came fast, then another, hard leather against bone, against breath. Windows along the street stayed dark. Curtains did not shift. In winter, people learned to mind their own business. Then the snow changed. It wasn't the wind or the temperature. It was the silence that broke, clean and sudden, like a held breath finally released. A man stepped out from the darkness beyond the street lamp. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his frame still powerful despite the stiffness in his movement. He wore a navy winter coat that had seen years of use, the hem brushing his thighs, dusted white with snow. Beneath it, a red and black flannel shirt showed at the collar, practical, worn soft. Faded jeans and brown leather boots completed the picture of a man who dressed for function, not attention. His face was angular, cut from hard lines and restraint. A square jaw, straight nose, a beard trimmed close and neat, silver just beginning to thread through the dark at his temples. His eyes were brown, deep-set, and usually warm, though there was nothing gentle in them now. He walked with a slight hitch, favoring his left knee, the kind of injury that never truly healed. Every step said discipline, control. Pain managed, not ignored. Stop. The word was low, steady, and carried through the snow without effort. The 2 men turned. "What did you say?" the bearded one slurred, squinting as if offended by the interruption. The man didn't repeat himself. He simply stood there, hands relaxed at his sides, posture calm, in a way that made the air tighten. Years of conflict had carved that stillness into him. He had learned long ago that noise was optional. A shape moved beside him. A German shepherd stepped forward, black and tan coat thick and healthy, snow clinging to his fur. He was large, muscular without bulk, 5 years old and at the height of his strength. His ears stood erect, eyes amber and alert, reflecting the streetlight with an intelligence that felt unsettling to those who noticed it. The dog wore a black harness, snug and well-fitted, a white patch stark against the darkness. Service dog, do not pet. He did not bark. He did not growl. He simply stood. The shaved-headed man took a step back before he realized he was doing it. "Hey," he muttered, "control your dog." The man finally spoke again. "He's under control." His voice carried something colder now, something edged, the tone of someone used to giving orders in places where hesitation got people killed. The dog shifted his weight slightly, positioning himself half a step ahead of the man, body angled between the threat and his handler. It was subtle, trained, intentional. The boy on the ground looked up, eyes wide, disbelief flickering through the pain. Jack Miller didn't look at the men again. His attention moved briefly to the boy, taking in the injuries, the shallow breathing, the fear wrapped tight around his spine. Something old and familiar stirred in his chest. Not rage. Rage wasted energy. This was recognition. The two men felt it then, though neither could have explained why. The weight of the moment pressed in on them, heavy as the snow itself. This wasn't a local. This wasn't a fight they could win by being louder or meaner. "What, you some kind of hero?" the bearded man scoffed, forcing a laugh that came out thin. Jack's gaze returned to him, calm, measuring. "No," he said, "just someone who doesn't walk away." The German shepherd lifted his head a fraction, eyes locked on the men, not threatening, promising. They backed away one step at a time, boots crunching in the snow, pride losing ground to instinct. When they turned and stumbled off into the storm, neither looked back. Jack knelt slowly beside the boy, ignoring the protest in his knee. The dog remained standing, watching the road, silent and vigilant. "You're safe now," Jack said quietly. The boy nodded, tears finally cutting paths through the grime on his face. Behind them, the snow kept falling, and somewhere in Silver Creek, something had just shifted. The antagonist and the clear risks. Derek Vaughn liked clean lines. Clean suits, clean boots, clean hands. He was 48, tall but slightly stooped at the shoulders, as if his spine had learned too early that leaning forward made people listen. His hair was dark, combed carefully back, with just enough gray at the temples to suggest experience rather than decline. His beard was trimmed close, precise, the kind worn by men who believed disorder was a weakness they could not afford. Derek did not look like a man who broke bones. That was intentional. In public, he spoke softly, smiled easily, and wore tailored coats that blended into city offices and waterfront bars. To the struggling families along Buffalo's riverfront, he presented himself as a solution. Short-term loans, no paperwork, no judgment, just help. Behind closed doors, Derek Vaughn was something else entirely. He believed fear was most effective when it traveled faster than truth. The three women in the warehouse had never been targets. Not at first. They were collateral. Witnesses in the wrong place at the wrong time, watching as unmarked barrels were unloaded into abandoned cold storage units under cover of snowfall. Chemical waste disguised as industrial runoff. Illegal shipments buried beneath winter's mercy. Winter erased footprints. Winter swallowed sound. Winter made men careless. Derek's mistake was believing winter erased consequences. He sat now inside a heated SUV parked several blocks away, watching snow pile against the windshield. The interior smelled of leather and expensive cologne. His hands rested calmly on his knees. He did not pace. He did not shout. Across from him sat Cal Morris, one of his enforcers. Cal was younger, late 20s, thick-necked, with a shaved head and a jaw that seemed permanently clenched. A faded scar ran from his left eyebrow to his cheekbone, a souvenir from a bar fight years ago. Cal enjoyed intimidation. He liked seeing people flinch. "Should have finished it," Cal muttered, glancing toward the warehouse district. Derek turned his head slowly. His eyes were pale gray, unreadable. "No," Derek said. "Fear works better unfinished." Cal shrugged, uneasy. He trusted Derek's instincts. Everyone did. That was how Derek stayed untouched. What neither man knew was that the night had already changed. Inside the warehouse, Mason Reed moved with quiet urgency. He did not waste time on anger. Anger was loud. Anger got people killed. He assessed injuries, circulation, consciousness. Laura's pulse was fast but steady. Emily was shivering violently, hypothermia setting in. Marianne's lips were blue, but her eyes followed Mason with calm trust, as if she recognized discipline when she saw it. "Stay with me," Mason said softly, his voice firm but gentle. It was the same tone he once used on men bleeding in sandstorms half a world away. Rex stood watch at the door, body angled outward, ears pivoting. With mechanical precision, the dog's posture alone was a warning. To anyone who understood working dogs, Rex was not guarding. He was holding a perimeter. When headlights flashed briefly through broken windows, Rex's muscles tightened. He did not bark. He did not growl. Mason felt it before he saw it. Company. Outside, Cal and two other men approached the warehouse, boots crunching loudly on the ice. They carried crowbars and flashlights, confident in numbers, confident in reputation. They had hurt people before. They expected the same result. The first man stopped short when he saw Rex. The dog stood perfectly still in the doorway, harness visible, chest forward, eyes locked, not aggressive, not retreating, waiting. Mason stepped into view behind Rex. Snow dusted his coat. His face was calm, almost expressionless. His left hand rested loosely at his side. His right stayed near Rex's harness, fingers relaxed. Cal scoffed. "You lost, old man?" Mason did not answer. Silence stretched. The storm pressed in around them. Rex took one deliberate step forward. That was all. Something shifted in the men's expressions. Instinct took over where bravado failed. They had seen dogs before, but not dogs like this, not dogs paired with men who moved like Mason moved. Cal raised his crowbar slightly. Mason spoke at last. "Walk away." His voice was low, controlled, not a threat, a statement. Cal hesitated. For the first time in years, doubt crept into his posture. He looked back toward the SUV where Derek waited unseen. "Next time," Cal said, trying to reclaim authority. Mason held his gaze. "There won't be one." The men retreated, boots slipping on ice, pride bruised but bodies intact. From the SUV, Derek watched them return. He saw the tension in their shoulders, the fear they would not admit. "Who was it?" Derek asked calmly. Cal swallowed. "Some vet and a dog." Derek's fingers tightened slightly on his knee. A Navy SEAL in Buffalo, with a service dog. That was not noise. That was a variable. Derek looked out into the storm, reassessing. Plans shifted silently in his mind. He did not panic. He adapted. What he did not understand yet was that Mason Reed was not hunting him. Mason was closing doors, and Rex was the reason no one rushed through them blindly. The first confrontation, the visitors came 2 days later. Not in the dead of night, not with headlights cutting through snow like blades. They arrived mid-morning, when the forest looked harmless and the cabin chimney finally breathed smoke again. Dalton understood optics. Men who relied on fear often did. Jack heard the truck before he saw it. Axel was already on his feet, body angled toward the window, ears high, Oster locked into work mode. The German Shepherd didn't bark. He never wasted sound. His tail stayed level, still, a sign Jack recognized from 100 patrols in places far from Colorado. "Company," Jack said quietly. The knock was polite, almost respectful. Jack opened the door. 3 men stood on the porch, boots dusted with snow, hands visible, smiles practiced. None of them carried weapons openly, but none of them looked like locals either. The one in front stepped forward. He was tall, lean, with a narrow face and a carefully shaped beard that tried too hard to look casual. His eyes were pale and restless, always moving, never settling. He wore a brown jacket too clean for real work, gloves tucked into his belt. "Morning," he said. "Name's Caleb Ross. We're here on behalf of Mr. Dalton." Behind him stood a heavier man with a thick neck and broken nose, the kind that told stories of past violence without needing words. The third was younger, early 20s, shoulders tense, eyes darting like he wasn't sure this was where he belonged. Jack stepped aside just enough to let them see the interior. Axel moved with him, sitting close at Jack's left leg, harness patch clear and unmistakable. Caleb's gaze dipped to the dog. "That's a serious animal," he said lightly. "He's serious about his job," Jack replied. Caleb smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "We won't take much of your time. Mr. Dalton just wants to make sure you understand the offer. Cash, clean, no hassle." Jack leaned against the doorframe, arms relaxed, shoulders loose. To anyone else, he might have looked indifferent. To men who knew violence, he looked coiled. "I said no," Jack replied. The heavier man shifted his weight. The younger one swallowed. Caleb spread his hands. "Come on. This place is falling apart. Winters are brutal. Taxes, repairs. You could walk away clean." Axel's head tilted slightly, eyes locked on Caleb's hands. Not his face. His hands. That detail did not go unnoticed by the man with the broken nose. Caleb took a step closer, too close. He reached out, fingers brushing Jack's shoulder in what might have been mistaken for familiarity. Axel rose, not fully, not aggressively, just half a step forward. The room changed. The dog's body blocked the space between Jack and the men with surgical precision. Muscles tight, ears forward, eyes bright and calculating. 5 years old, prime strength, trained restraint. A weapon that didn't need to be unleashed to be understood. The younger man froze, the heavy one's jaw tightened. Caleb stopped breathing for half a second. Jack placed his hand on Axel's harness. "Not needed," he said. The words were calm, measured. They weren't for the dog. They were for himself. The silence stretched long enough to become uncomfortable. Then a voice cut in from outside. "That's far enough." A woman stood at the edge of the porch, boots sinking slightly into the snow. She was in her early 30s, tall and slim, wrapped in a dark green winter coat that fit her frame without hiding it. Her hair was chestnut brown, pulled back into a low braid, strands escaping to brush against pale, wind-chapped skin. Her face carried sharp intelligence, softened by fatigue. This was Sarah Whitmore. Sarah ran the town's small supply store and had lived in Silver Creek her entire life. She had learned caution young, after her husband died in a logging accident that everyone agreed had been avoidable. Since then, she trusted patterns more than promises. She crossed her arms, eyes on Caleb. "You're on private property," she said, "and folks around here don't appreciate pressure tactics." Caleb forced a laugh. "We're just talking." Sarah's gaze flicked to Axel, then to Jack. "Doesn't look like a conversation he invited," she replied. Jack gave her a brief nod. Respect, recognition. Caleb exhaled slowly, stepping back. "Message delivered," he said. "No harm done." The men retreated, boots thudding hollowly against the porch boards. The truck started, tires spinning once before catching. Axel watched until it vanished. Sarah stayed. "You okay?" she asked Jack. "Yes." She glanced down at the dog. "He always that quiet?" Jack allowed a faint smile. "Only when it matters." Sarah studied them both for a moment, then nodded. "Dalton won't stop." "I know," she hesitated. "If you need anything, supplies, information." Jack met her eyes. "I appreciate it." As she walked away, Axel finally relaxed, lowering himself back to the floor. Jack looked out the window at the empty road. Dalton had tested the boundary and learned exactly where it was. Footprints beneath the snow, Jack did not investigate the cabin like a grieving grandson. He moved through it the way he had moved through abandoned compounds overseas. Slowly, methodically, with respect for what silence could hide. Morning light filtered weakly through the frost-clouded windows, turning dust into pale ghosts that drifted and vanished. Axel followed him without sound, nails never clicking, body always positioned where Jack could see him with a glance. 5 years old, black and tan coat thick against the cold. The German shepherd worked on instinct sharpened by repetition. He did not need commands. He read Jack's breathing, the tension in his shoulders, the pauses between steps. Jack knelt near the hearth, pressing his palm flat against the floorboards. The wood answered back wrong, not hollow enough to be wrought, not solid enough to be foundation. He shifted his weight carefully, ignoring the dull ache in his left knee, and tested the seams with his fingers. A hairline crack ran along the edge, old and deliberate, disguised beneath decades of wear. His grandmother had been small, soft-spoken, and patient. She had also been careful in ways Jack had never fully understood as a boy. Axel stopped moving. His ears rose, his head angled toward the far wall. Jack followed his line of sight. The dog stepped forward, nose low, tracing a slow circle near the back corner of the cabin. He paused once, pressed his paw lightly to the floor, then looked up at Jack. No bark, just certainty. "Good catch," Jack murmured. It took nearly an hour to lift the concealed panel. Beneath it lay a narrow crawl space, lined with old planks and insulation yellowed with age. A metal latch held a shallow storage compartment in place. Jack opened it and found folders wrapped in oilcloth, the paper inside dry despite the years. Land records, hand-drawn maps, old permits stamped and re-stamped, and names. Dalton's name appeared more than once, not recently, not casually. This had been building for years. Jack sat back on his heels, jaw tightening. The files painted a clear picture. Shell companies, winter resort proposals that never broke ground, properties bought cheap after intimidation, then quietly folded into holding groups that funneled money through layers of paperwork. The cabin sat at the edge of something much larger, a strategic piece of land Dalton needed to connect his claims. Axel let out a low sound, barely more than breath. Jack looked up. The dog had moved to the window again, body angled outward, tail still. His gaze fixed on the tree line where the forest thickened and shadows gathered like unspoken thoughts. Jack stood and joined him. Fresh snow lay undisturbed near the porch. Beyond that, near the tree line, something broke the pattern. Footprints. They were careful, spaced wide, partially brushed over. Someone had tried to hide them, tried and failed. Jack followed them with his eyes, tracing their arc around the cabin, noting where they paused, where weight shifted. This wasn't curiosity, it was surveillance. By midday, Sarah Whitmore arrived with supplies. She parked her truck farther down the drive than before, cautious now, eyes scanning before she stepped out. Up close, the winter made her look harder than she was. Her cheeks were wind-reddened, her pale skin marked with fine lines earned from years of cold and responsibility. Her coat hung open just enough to reveal a thick sweater beneath, practical, not decorative. "You look like you didn't sleep," she said, setting a crate of canned goods on the porch. "Didn't," Jack replied. She followed his gaze toward the trees. "They have been circling," Jack nodded. "How long?" "Since your visitors left." Her mouth tightened. Dalton's people aren't subtle when they think fear will do the work for them. Axel shifted, placing himself half a step closer to Sarah than before, protective but not tense. She noticed and gave a small, humorless smile. "I like him." "He likes honesty," Jack said. Sarah exhaled. "You should know something. 2 families on the ridge sold last winter. Both said they were tired of fighting. Both moved out within a week. And one of them burned down 6 months later. Electrical fire, they said." Her eyes hardened. There was no power. Jack closed his eyes briefly. Dalton wasn't escalating randomly. He was following a pattern. That night, the forest grew louder. Wind moved through branches like whispers. Snow creaked beneath its own weight. Axel paced the cabin once, then settled near the door, facing outward. He didn't sleep. Neither did Jack. Close to midnight, headlights flickered between trees and vanished. Axel rose silently, hackles lifting just enough to change his silhouette. Jack stood behind him, hand resting lightly on the dog's harness. "Not yet," he whispered. The vehicle did not approach. It waited, watched. Then it left. By morning, more tracks appeared, closer this time. Jack knelt beside one print, pressing his fingers into the compressed snow. The tread was heavy, military surplus boots, not local, not accidental. Dalton wasn't trying to scare him anymore. He was gathering information. Jack straightened slowly, breath steady, mind already shifting into planning. He looked down at Axel, who met his gaze without blinking. "They're deciding," Jack said quietly, "whether to push or to strike." Axel's tail gave one slow sweep. Jack looked back toward the forest, eyes cold now, focused. Dalton had made his choice, and Jack Miller was done pretending this was just about land. Snow, tactics, and dawn. The storm arrived without warning. Wind slammed into the trees like a living thing, bending branches until they screamed. Snow fell sideways, thick and blinding, erasing the world beyond a few feet. It was the kind of night people stayed inside for, the kind criminals trusted. Dalton trusted it too much. Jack was awake when the power cut out. He didn't move right away. He listened. The cabin settled and creaked under the weight of snow, a familiar sound now. Axel stood near the back door, body still, ears forward, eyes sharp. The German shepherd's black and tan coat was dusted white, his harness snug against powerful shoulders. 5 years old, disciplined, built for endurance. Axel turned his head slightly. Footsteps, not rushing, testing. Jack eased the rifle from its mount but didn't chamber around. He had already decided this wouldn't be loud. Loud drew chaos. Chaos hurt the wrong people. He placed a hand on Axel's harness. The dog leaned into it, calm and ready. 3 figures moved through the storm toward the cabin. Their outlines were blurred, faces hidden by hoods and scarves. One was tall and narrow-shouldered, movement sharp and impatient. Another was stockier, heavier, favoring his right leg. The third hung back, younger, uncertain. They pried at the back door. Jack slipped out the front instead. Snow swallowed him instantly, masking his steps. He moved low and wide, circling, using trees and drifts for cover. Years of night operations returned without effort, breathing slow, steps measured, angles calculated. Axel ghosted ahead, silent, a dark shape against the white. The first man cursed as the door resisted. The second laughed, a short, nervous sound. That was when Axel appeared behind them, not charging, not barking, blocking. The tall one spun, heart slamming into panic as amber eyes locked onto him. Axel stood planted, muscles coiled, the promise of violence contained but unmistakable. The stockier man bolted. He ran straight into Jack. Jack took him down hard, using the man's momentum against him, twisting, locking, forcing him face first into the snow. The man cried out once before Jack pinned him, knee pressing between the shoulder blades with precise pressure, enough to control, not enough to cripple. The younger one froze. Police lights flared through the storm moments later, red and blue slicing through white. Sirens stayed low until the last second. Jack had timed it carefully. The men dropped. Axel held position until Jack whistled once. Dalton arrived too late to save anything. Eric Dalton stood on the roadside, face pale beneath his trimmed beard, anger leaking through the cracks of his practiced calm as deputies led him away. For the first time, his eyes avoided Jack's. The storm broke just before dawn. Sunlight spilled across the ridge, soft and clean, as if the mountain itself had exhaled. Snow lay untouched again, hiding the chaos of the night. Before. Weeks passed. The cabin changed. Word spread through Silver Creek, quietly at first. People brought blankets, wood, food, a spare generator. The place became a shelter when the cold turned cruel, a space for older folks who couldn't keep their homes warm, for veterans who needed somewhere quiet to breathe. Sarah Whitmore helped organize it, clipboard in hand, hair pulled back, cheeks flushed from the cold. She moved with purpose now, shoulders straighter than before. One afternoon, a woman arrived with her young daughter. Emily Carter was in her late 30s, slender, with tired blue eyes and pale skin marked by long winters. Her blonde hair was cut short, practical, the way women did when time mattered more than style. She spoke softly, but there was steel beneath it. She had lost her husband overseas. She understood silence. Axel lay on the porch as they arrived, snow dusting his back. The girl stopped short. "Is he scary?" she whispered. Jack crouched beside her, voice gentle. "Only to people who mean harm." Axel lifted his head, tail giving a slow wag. The girl smiled. On clear nights, Jack sat on the porch with a mug warming his hands, watching the valley lights flicker on one by one. His knee still ached. The past still stirred when he least expected it. But he wasn't running anymore. Axel rested nearby, eyes half closed, no longer working, just watching. The mountain stood quiet, and anyone who thought about testing that quiet thought better of it. Some people call it luck, some call it timing, but those who have walked through darkness know another name for it: grace. On a night when snow tried to erase the truth, protection still stood. Not because of strength alone, but because God places guardians where fear expects silence. Sometimes that guardian wears scars. Sometimes it walks on 4 legs. Sometimes it arrives exactly when hope feels thin. Jack did not return to Silver Creek by accident. And Axel was never just a dog. In a world that often rewards cruelty and noise, this story reminds us of something simple and sacred. Evil moves fast, but truth moves with purpose. And when the time is right, justice does not need to shout. It simply stands firm. If you are watching this and carrying a quiet burden, if you feel unseen, unprotected, or tired of fighting alone, remember this: God has not forgotten you. Help may already be closer than you think. Before you go, take a moment. Share this story with someone who needs a reminder that goodness still watches the night. Comment where you're watching from, so we can pray for one another across distances. Subscribe to this channel if you believe stories of courage, faith, and justice still matter. And may God bless you. May He guard your home. May He strengthen those who protect the innocent. And may peace find you even in the coldest seasons of life. Until the next story, stay warm, stay kind, and may God walk beside you.